Hello everyone, I'm Samar and I'm founder of Jugnoo. So for those of you who don't know what Jugnoo is a hyperlocal marketplace based out of India, and we provide on-demand transportation and delivery services, and we are the third largest on-demand company in India. And today I just want to talk about a few things about on-demand industry in general. We believe that on-demand is a new type of industry which has kind of pretty much started in the last few years, and so I'll talk about what is so special and what are the trends that have really gotten this industry started, and then a little bit about technology that is supporting this, that is needed for any on-demand company to be created. And then I'll tell you a little bit about our story as Jugnoo, as a company, and also what we feel future will be for on-demand industry and us as Jugnoo. And I hope that some of the entrepreneurs in the room can start, can get inspired and from the story and start something of their own. So basically, the first trend that has really gotten the on-demand industry going up is that economies of scale used to be something that was a deterrent for small companies to start, right? So every big company was doing everything much more efficiently than smaller companies, right? The major reason was that for bigger companies, they did not have downtime, which means that utilization of resources or manpower was much more efficient than smaller companies, right? But with technology, that has actually become economy of arbitrage. So what it means is that even when people have downtime, it's actually possible to use those incremental downtimes using technology, and that is actually the major driving trend for on-demand economy and industries. So on the consumer side, the ownership model is fading away. So earlier, so we still have that kind of aspiration, at least a place where I come from, to own a house and to own a car. But that is slowly giving away, and people are moving to a economy where they prefer to consume things on demand rather than owning things. So this is another trend that is accelerating on-demand technologies and on-demand businesses, because young people want to move around, they don't want to tie themselves with anything, so they just want to consume stuff as and when they need. So finally, what's happening is digital platforms are emerging to connect both the supply and demand, which is present in a real-time basis, and these are basically companies like Jugnoo, Uber, Airbnb, which are basically the on-demand companies. And second trend that has actually enabled this to happen is ambient computation, right? So it's just a fancy word for more smartphone penetration, but the idea is that 5 years ago, so if smartphones were fairly rare and very expensive, so to speak. But today, if you go to India, even a rickshaw puller or any low-income group people would typically have a smartphone, and this smartphone is location aware. It knows what time it is. So it's a very, very smart context-aware device. So what that does is that it enables this person, this owner of the smartphone, to not just consume information and be good at what he or she is doing, but also connects this person to a virtual workforce. So that is exactly so if you look at all the primary theme in any on-demand company is actually a smartphone that they give. So if you go to any emerging market, the first thing that any on-demand company does is buys a lot of smartphones, starts giving it to their so-called service providers. You might have seen that in Turkey, but in India, that's pretty much it. So smartphone companies also go to companies like us because they know we are driving smartphone penetration. So it's a positive feedback loop where on-demand companies are starting because of more smartphone penetration, but they're in turn also increasing smartphone penetration. So this is actually helping a lot. And so now I want to talk a little bit about, if anybody wants to, start an on-demand company, like what are some of the steps that you should take about? Because we see that in the past few, years, pretty much, especially from Silicon Valley, almost anything that could be on demand has happened, has been built, and thankfully a lot of that has been shut down because people were not really thinking clearly. Like for example, kittens on demand to hug. So something like that, like crazy things coming up just because people could do something. They thought everything will be on demand. So hopefully this will kind of be a little more logical way of thinking for people who are thinking of starting their own on-demand companies. So first of all, I think the idea is that you need to discover a little bit about the market. So what I mean to say by that is that just look around what kind of so just start from the morning and go towards your evenings and see what is the kind of transactions you are doing every day. So in the morning you typically buy milk, buy cereal, bread, and then you take a taxi, and then you go to work and typically order food during lunchtime. So if you just chart this thing out, you will see that there are almost 5 or 10 big on-demand businesses there, food delivery, online cabs, and accommodation. So this is like basically the first step to look at things. But when you don't do this, and it's actually very obvious to think of it that yes, of course everybody would be doing this. But when you think about some of the businesses, they have actually not done this. So they just they wanted to be so different, and they forgot about this discovery process, and in the process created a business that really nobody wanted. So then the second thing is, when you have discovered some behavior where there is transaction, so the second thing is you need to do validation, which means that a behavior is there, transactions are happening, scale is probably there or not, but is the intervention through technology logical or not? For example, you see some businesses, for example, this digital cash thing, right? A lot of places just push. So in India, very recently, just demonetized their whole currency, thinking that people have to go to digital transactions. While actually I support it, but at the same time, behavior did not change right away. Digital transactions increased, but the moment remonetization happened, digital transactions actually decreased again, right? So this has happened. If you look at last month's data, digital transactions went down again. But it may be a small nudge in the right direction, but the idea is that not every behavior needs intervention at the right space to change it, right? So you don't really need technology in everything. So this is the second step. What is the real value add you're actually bringing to that behavior? And finally, and third step is, when you have these two, that this is a logical thing to be done, and there is a clear value add that technology is bringing, then you need to think about efficiency, right? Because a lot of businesses have actually done the two things right, and then they blew out of proportion and shut down. And if you look at Silicon Valley's or Indian startup stories as I follow, I mean, there's just too many on-demand companies shutting down. People feel that this is because on-demand as an industry doesn't make sense, but I think it's because people didn't really work on their efficiency, of the transactional, per transaction efficiency, and just scaled and because of that had to shut down. So this rat race where you thought, there was this thinking that let's just, corner market, efficiency will be taken care of later on. I think that has been proven wrong in the last few years, and a lot of companies have shut down. A lot of companies are on verge of shutting down. So the fact is, like, get efficiency first on a per transactional basis, and then go to scale. So finally, it is, once you have that efficiency figured out on a, transactional basis, then you just basically scale. That is more like, building a team and putting the right amount of capital into the business. So hopefully this chart will help some of the entrepreneurs here. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about, what are some of the components in an on-demand business from a technology perspective, right? So it's actually very easy to think of on-demand as a very, so I meet a lot of people, especially, enterprises. They say on-demand is a fad. It's not really an industry in itself, right? And I mean, to some extent, it is true, but I think there are some aspects of these kind of businesses which are very, very different, and these core technology components actually try to address that. So if you look at, an enterprise which thinks that, there is like no on-demand industry, you will see that there are some aspects which are inherently very, very different. So for example, aggregation, right? By aggregation, I mean, on-demand businesses inherently do not have, or ideally should not have, a captive workforce. They basically just aggregate people. Coming back to the time arbitrage model, when people are free, the trend is that people want, open-ended and flexible jobs. I want to do it for the next 1 hour, I do it. So that basically is called aggregation, right? You're just aggregating people, not really hiring people. And then there is a module or concept called scheduling, where people are able to choose when they work, how they work, how much time they work. So for example, a student who wants to make money wants to just drive taxi on a Friday night and a Saturday night, because he or she knows, that time they can make more money. And why work on a Monday morning when you can do the same amount of, spend the same amount of time and make much more money? So this is what, scheduling does. And then there is profiling. So from a company's perspective, right, earlier what would happen is, there would be an interview process, there would be a proper, screening process, and then somebody would be hired with the hope that he or she is going to be long-term in the business, in the company. But now that has changed from that to basically a profile being created. It's like you start with, typically on-demand companies don't really do a lot of screening in the beginning. Yes, there's some criminal background checks and stuff, but then a profile gets created according to the behavior of the individual. And this is basically takes into account the history. And so if you perform better, the platform rewards you. If you don't perform better, the platform basically, punishes you. So that's what profiling means. And finally, matching. This is very critical, because when a transaction happens in on-demand businesses, you typically have like, anywhere from 5 minutes to a half-an-hour window to complete the transaction, and it's very, very difficult. So this becomes very important, matching the right person, right consumer to the right delivery provider. And finally, notifications are a basic thing, because people want intelligent and context-aware notifications. So, and then there is tracking. So even though GPS have become very, very efficient, it still is the most, I would say, battery consuming and the troublesome of all the pieces. And finally, payments. This is very, very geo kind of specific. And finally, there's curation. So what happens, when transactions go wrong? How do you create that? How do you, what are the recourse for customers? So it is basically more like, so the idea of curation module is that you build the system in a way that it is so it's, as a family, it's, self-punishing or self-rewarding. So the community basically rewards or punishes the good people and bad people and improves itself. And finally, so now I'll talk a little bit about our story. So what is Jugnoo, and how we started and what we are doing. So Jugnoo is a hyperlocal marketplace. So, and as we think of ourselves, we are a marketplace that connects people within consumers and merchants within a 3-mile radius, right? This 3-mile radius can be like, it can be 1 mile for some auto rickshaw ride, or it can be 3 miles for a grocery delivery. But essentially, this is important because it has to happen in a small vicinity of the consumer, right? And just for the curious people, so Jugnoo means firefly in Hindi and I think Urdu, and so this logo is basically, if you take a magic wand and try to create a firefly's picture, this is what you will get. And the idea is that it's the assistant that people will have, and you want something, we'll get it for you. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we started and what were the choices we made and how sort of we survived, because so our competition, our biggest competitor in India is Uber, and a lot more. In fact, you'll see that shortly. So this is the reason why, so I'm a physics guy from background, right? So obviously, whenever you have an idea, you first do some maths and figure out is there like economic basis of doing this? Is the fundamental macroeconomic right or not? So today there are 5 million auto rickshaws in the country, in India, and typically, if you look at the ride times and you look at the minimum amount of buffer in between, you'll see that about 70% of the time they're actually sitting idle. And this 70% of the time, at present, earning potential, what they are making right now, equates to $26 billion per year. This is such a humongous number, and it also means that there is huge inefficiency in just the auto rickshaw business in the country. And of course, it's a theoretical number, so you can't really probably make some network 100% efficient. But from 30% efficiency, we believe that we can take it to 70 or 80% efficiency. That's pretty much doable. So this is the reason why we started. And so our strategy was, so when we started, Ola was already big, Uber was already big, Grofers, Big Basket, Runner. So these are 3 things that we do, right? We do rides, we do B2C deliveries, we do B2B deliveries, and they all had like big players in them, right? So we had to kind of think of something, sort of unconventional. Otherwise, we would not exist, because we were pretty, like, it's just about 2 years old. So we were very late to the market, and we had to think something out of the box. So what we thought of was that we will focus on the markets that these guys don't go to. So these guys are all in tier 1 markets in India, right? If you see that there is, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, these are cities basically in India. And so if you look at the cost of growth and competition presence. So in tier 1, all the things have to be grown in a very expensive manner, and because the competition is high, so they're correlated, of course. And in tier 2, pretty much all the things are low competition. In B2B deliveries, for example, there's no competition. B2C deliveries, there's no competition. In auto aggregation, there's a little bit of competition, but not really. So, but at the same time, a lot of, it sounds like fairly obvious, but what you have to understand is that in tier 2 economies, the frequency of transactions is also very, very low. So a person does much less per capita transactions, and also the size of transaction is lower than tier 1 market, right? So you cannot, that is the reason why these guys don't exist in tier 2 markets. So, because, just having a payroll, having a staff, having an office just does not justify. So how do we do that? We said we'll do everything, right? And in the beginning, it sounded kind of stupid, but we're all geeks in the company, pretty much the whole founding team is all engineers. Nobody was doing the finance bit. So we said, okay, let's do it. And let's see if we can do. So we took the whole tier 2 vertical and became a company that does everything, and that justified for us, being in tier 2 where transaction frequency is low, and at the same time we were able to justify having an office in 40 cities, right, without burning. So tier 3 is still kind of far away from us also. I think it's going to be more like, once we capture tier 2 properly, hopefully tier 3 will become like offshoots from that. So this is the contrarian bet that we had, and because of this, it's much more complex business model, because we do rides, we do B2B delivery, B2C delivery. So in B2C, then again, there's grocery, there is food. But because we look at ourselves as a pure technology company, which is just getting people technology adoption, that is why we are able to do this. And so so we do about 40,000 rides in the people rides per day, and roughly about 15,000 deliveries per day in different formats. So we do about 50 to 60,000 transactions daily, and we're present in about 40 cities all across the country. So to give you an example, so if the bottom part below, like the bottom 1/3, I actually don't know the language of any of the places. And if you go to the, and also to give you a sense of diversity, there was this one day, we had floods in Guwahati, which is the extreme, right, and we had drought in Nasik, Nagpur, a lot of places, and we had voting going on in one place, and we had rioting going on in another place. So 4, extreme situations, all different, going on at the same time. So we see that, one fine day, this is like 20% or 30% dip in business. And we realize, this is what it is. So we joke internally that we are more like a weather station company, because there's so much going on in India. Like one place will have floods, one place will have, droughts going on, and it's very difficult to believe sitting in so from the second city from top, that's our HQ. It's very difficult to believe that actually it could be raining a lot when you are actually, it's very hot and arid in one area. But that's Indian diversity for you. So it's I think a good thing, just tough to manage. So what is really our advantage at this point? Because ideally, a lot of investors told us, when we are trying to raise money, that you guys should not exist, right? There is like Ola, there is Uber, they're far big, and you're trying to do too much. And this is one feedback that in almost every core meeting that we have, we always ask ourselves, are we doing too much? And the answer is yes. We are of course trying to do too much, but at the same time, the way we look at things is that we are trying to capture the long tail, right? So long tail aggregation is a very, very difficult thing to do. It's in some sense, it's the dirty thing to do. Nobody wants to do it, right? But if you can do it, nobody is going to come in and replace you, right? So that's the tough thing. So one day, I was actually going to market to sell delivery to one of the vendors, one of the merchants, and he said, so you do delivery and you do vegetables and all this stuff. And I said, yes. So in short, you do all the things that nobody wants to do. I said, that's actually a pretty good definition of what we want to do. And as long as we are successful at that, we'll be a fairly successful company. But it's difficult. So the advantages are that the market is huge. So unlike developed countries, 80% of Indian GDP is not in the top 5 cities, right? So only about 20% of the GDP resides in the top 5 cities of the country, and the 80% is actually in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So that is, that gives us a huge, huge market to play with. And it's very, very distributed and diverse market. And then CAC is very low. So cost of customer acquisition is very, very low in these markets because there's nobody really, present. All you have to do is just say that, we are there, and uh, the market will, the demand vacuum will take care of itself, right? And finally, we are probably, we are EBITDA positive as of last month, and we actually did not really expect that this could happen. It just happened by chance, because some of the things went better than they could have. And in India, at least, I know that there is no other on-demand company that is EBITDA positive, and probably in the world there is no on-demand company that is EBITDA positive. And it's almost like a fashion to be, EBITDA positive. In fact, so only today somebody told me, man, so how do you convince your investors? Because the moment you get in EBITDA positive, they start talking in terms of EBITDA multiples, right? And I said, that's why we don't talk to investors, because we don't know how to say. Because when you are EBITDA negative, right, you are actually just showing the market size. This is the market size, we are going to capture all of it, and we're going to be huge, right? It's just a dream. The moment you get EBITDA positive, everybody will say, okay, so this is your profit, we'll multiply it with this so-and-so number, and that's what you are, So, but along with this, we have a very good growth curve also. So we are growing at this very moment about 10% month on month, in terms of GMV and net revenues. And the idea is that, just stay a little bit EBITDA positive, but keep reinvesting all the profits in the business. And so this is what we think, is going to be our evolution. So basically what we have seen is, and part of the reason why I'm here in Turkey speaking about a company in India, is that, we believe that there are so many markets like, Turkey, South Africa, Egypt, all the markets that you guys are actually just talking about in this conference, is that, these markets are not big enough for big VC money to come in, but they're not small enough. These businesses are going to happen. And it's very, very difficult for a company like, Jugnoo or Uber or, anybody else to come in and just take care of all of, the market needs. So local champions will win. But these markets are not big enough for local champions to actually create their own technology. And today the technology is actually, commoditized, because over 100 companies have created it in the last 5 years. So what is the point of creating it? So, just for example, last mile delivery, in the last talk there was this thing going on. Last mile delivery is the big thing, right? Is a pretty tough problem to solve. We have been at it for about 3 years now. We have solved it from a technology perspective, but I don't think we are going to be anywhere out of India anytime soon. So what makes sense is that we have just, kind of I would say branded or re-envisioned ourselves into 3 different layers. What that means is that Token, which is the bottom layer, is basically a platform which is a platform for any on-demand business to provide, services right off the bat. So if you have an idea, you sign up and you start, managing your business day one. And then the second layer is Jugnoo, which, because almost every business, when they start to scale, they need some plumbing to kind of, connect with other businesses. That is what this layer does. The third layer is Jugnoo, which is the full stack service. So the idea is that we want to be a global company, but without being present everywhere, in its whole entirety. So the first 2 layers will hopefully become a global company, global layer. And the top layer, we'll keep focusing on India. And that is the next step in our evolution. And hopefully, you guys will also, and a lot of entrepreneurs are just, so, they come to us and say, we want to experiment it out. Can you help out? So the way it started is, can you help out with technology? Can we launch Jugnoo in Bangladesh? We said, of course you can. And in fact, in 2 months, we are actually going live in Bangladesh with a group. So it's our first outside India market, but not in a Jugnoo brand name. So the first 2 layers are there, but essentially, Jugnoo is, going to be there as a technology play only. And that is what we hope, from all the markets around the world. And that's how we hope to become a global company. So that's pretty much it. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.